In 1956, the UK and France invaded the recently nationalised Suez Canal in Egypt. The United States, with its newfound global influence, along with the United Nations, provided financial pressure to the UK to back off this territory. The US directed an outcome in favour of its geopolitical preference for the region, and thus what was once an abstract, tacit and gradual secession of global hegemony from the UK to the US became a tangible, explicit and sudden handing of the baton into the post-World War II world. And what better symbol of this power and entrenchment in foreign affairs than the Vietnam conflict? And what better symbol for looking at the conflict under this prism than the movie Apocalypse Now? And what better symbol for the layered, textured tapestry of the country that propagated the conflict than the U.S. general election, specifically to look at the 2024 election? Spoilers for the film Apocalypse Now. It's quite a simple film with lots of spectacle, set during the Vietnam conflict. It's about a battle-fractured Captain Willard who is enlisted by the US on a secret mission to neutralize the once-gifted Colonel Kurtz. US intel has demonstrated that he lost his mind while he sunk himself into the jungle and conflict. He's made himself into a fanatical prophet to a small fraction of American troops, Allied troops, and the local tribespeople. Under his leadership, he's been found to unlive anyone his erratic paranoia deems as a threat. Along Willard's way to Kurtz, Willard meets the charismatic Colonel Kilgore, whose love for surfing motivates him to take control of an enemy-held beach, and whose brashness and arrogance help lead the unit to victory there and have general success throughout the conflict. Willard also encounters a tiger which attacks him, attends a USO show performed by Playmates, and, depending on the version of the movie, visits a French tea plantation. When Willard finally meets Kurtz at the end of the movie, he listens to his rambling thoughts and postulates. Kurtz seemingly accepts Willard's mission to eliminate him, and this occurs during a sacrificial ceremony of a water buffalo by the local tribe. So what can this movie tell us about the US election? And/or what can the election tell us about the movie? Bidenomics has reindustrialized many parts of the US.
This historic investment for Ohio, one of the largest investments in semiconductor manufacturing in American history.
Leveled up infrastructure with bipartisan support.
That includes $284 billion for roads, bridges, freight and passenger rail and public transit.
And the US has seen the lowest inflation out of the G7 as of 2023. Surely this means the election should be a no-brainer, and yet the election seems as much of a malaise as Apocalypse Now. What does the movie and the election tell us about the very soul of America? The movie shows the symbols of American identity through the expansive lattice of American military equipment, which demonstrates superiority through the air, ground, and water. The identity demonstrated is American power through technology. Political power of the American political class is shown via massive rallies and political conventions. Political fundraising, rally crowd sizes, and even performers have all been reported as indicators of political momentum.
All week, Harris has drawn massive crowds, 12,000 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 14,000 in Philadelphia.
We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
The VP shattering records. Her campaign says they've raised $310 million last month.
The elections are filled with chants and motifs that each side used to signal their political momentum.
But America, we are not going back. We are not going back.
symbolizes to one half of America to never return to the perceived chaos of the Trump presidency, is towards the other half of America their determination to push against a perceived establishment devoted to suppressing Trump, and Ride the Valkyrie signals to the Viet Cong that the front of American power is in transit towards them, as shown when Kilgore tells his men to blast the music from loudspeakers on their helicopters as their fleet approaches the point of invasion. The Vietnam conflict is exemplary of America exporting its ideology across the globe. Where Vietnam was a failed attempt at implementing a Western-aligned liberal free market into a foreign country, now its ideology spread through the global zeitgeist like spores through nature.
Former President Trump's suggestion that the U.S. would not protect NATO allies, failing to spend enough on defense, is prompting significant fallout on the world stage.
It was obvious to me that the ever eastward expansion of NATO and the European Union was giving this man a reason to his Russian people to say they're coming for us again and to go to war.
Or is it perhaps more mechanical than that? Ideas exemplified at this current election.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best.
A further 21 illegal migrants crossed the channel to Britain today.
Are they disseminated for any larger political gain?
Political parties have been quoted in Facebook's own research saying, "We know you changed how you pick out the content that goes in the home feed. And now, if we don't publish angry, hateful, polarizing, divisive content,
or to farm clicks,
crickets. We don't get anything."
Engagement, conversation with algorithmic precision, spread with as much intent and resources as the brute force showcased in Apocalypse Now. America is a land of cultural export, whether it's anti-communism, social media trends, and pop stars from across the sea endorsing its political candidate. Little has changed since the 60s.
And $266 billion for what's called core infrastructure. That's power, water, and new broadband across the country.
And what does Willard see during his mission to neutralize cats? He meets the establishment who set him on his mission.
This war, things get confused out there. Power, ideals, dual morality.
Kilgore, who unquestioningly and unsettlingly follows his prime directive set by his military higher-ups of warmonger.
Smell that? You smell that? Napalm, son!
With complete, detached madness prevented only by his love of surfing and R&R.
If I say it's safe to surf this beach, Captain, it's safe to surf this beach!
And Katz, who is infected by madness to its completion, who's mutated his prime directive into something beyond the scope of the establishment, who meanders eloquently and yet without cogence.
Who do not know what horror means. Horror. Horror has a face.
Katz is anti-establishment.
They've destroyed the fabric of our country.
A cynic.
They probably did it because they think they're going to get votes.
Of where the country is, who calls for change to harrowing effects.
This 920-page document would usher in the most conservative executive branch in modern American history.
Get everyone you know and vote. You won't have to do it anymore.
It's called Project 2025.
Project 2025 is a mandate associated to Trump's party, which calls for radical change in America's institutions. Similar to how Katz calls for radical change to the Vietnam conflict, in that America should fight with even more brutality there.
And hack off every inoculated arm. There they were in a pile. The strength to do that. If I had 10 divisions of those men, then our troubles here would be over very quickly.
Katz is detached from the established system and acts as though he has evolved past the laws prescribed to him.
He's out there operating without any decent restraint, totally beyond the pale of any acceptable.
Donald Trump, the first former president to be convicted in a criminal trial.
Or is he the natural evolution of the establishment? Its logical next step.
Are my methods unsound?
Kurtz was once a role model, product of the U.S. military.
Third generation West Point, top of his class, Korea, airborne, about 1,000 decorations.
Perhaps Kurtz can be described as someone with charisma.
Terrible. He can be mean. He can be right. He's fighting the war. He's a great man.
With his vague, incoherent words, making it easier for people
5 miles, you think
to attach meaning,
Our country has been under siege for a long time.
or to find that leader endearing.
Say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context.
We train young men to drop fire on people, but their commanders won't allow them to ride on their airplane because it's obscene.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan.
Empty promises of hope.
Kamala Harris was not a progressive prosecutor.
Or violent rhetoric to galvanize the country into change.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Trump could also be Kilgore. Kilgore is the perfect representative of the American institution in Vietnam. He fights without thinking and coordinates America's resources perfectly. Similarly, Trump is the perfect product of his institution. Trump's being 20th century capitalist America. He sees the presidency as sport.
By popular demand, I'm doing a new series of Trump digital trading cards. You all know what they are.
As Kilgore does with war.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning. It smells like victory.
Kilgore shows nebulous ethical standards when he shows his passion for war, sympathy for a fallen enemy.
He wants water. He can drink patty water. Get out of here! Any man brave enough to fight with his guts strapped on could drink from my canteen any day. Colonel!
And then an even quicker dismissal of the fallen man a minute later. This could map onto Kamala's nebulous politics.
Harris's record on wrongful convictions.
I stood up for veterans and students being scammed by big for-profit colleges.
It's about body-worn cameras. She was asked by the California state legislature to support a bill to mandate all police officers wearing body-worn cameras, and she declined to do that.
As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks, delivered $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure.
Both candidates could map onto both Kurtz and Kilgore. Kamala's policy ambiguity and prosecution background are in line with the unclear ramblings of Kurtz and the moral ambiguity of Kilgore. Trump's aggressive rhetoric maps onto Kurtz's dangerous and violent rogue squadron/cult, and Trump's literal, incoherent and unsubstantiated campaign speeches also map onto Kurtz's droning monologues. Yet his privileged background could make him the exemplary product of a prosperous yet violent institution like Kilgore. The difference is, one out of the two political candidates must represent an institution at the end of its cycle, like Kurtz, who's reached the logical end of the conflict in Vietnam having any sense of rationality, where Willard consequently proceeded to neutralize Kurtz, as he was ordered to do since the beginning of the film.
Process, this transmutation, this renaissance, this rebirth, which is the basis of all life. The one rule that all man, from the time they first were walking around looking up at the sun, scratching around for food and an animal to kill, the first concept that I feel got into their head was the idea of life and death. That the sun went down and the sun went up. That the crop, when they learned how to make a crop, it died. In the winter, everything died. And to the first man, he must have thought, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And then all of a sudden, there was spring and everything came alive and it was better. I mean, after all, look at Vietnam. Look at my movie. You'll see what I'm talking.
Whoever wins, it's ultimately the beginning of their end too. The cycle will simply begin again, anew, and rhetoric will build up and discharge in the next 4 years. Who does America destroy to make space for the new this time? Is Katz, according to the left's critics, the experienced yet over-promising Democratic Party, which doesn't realistically help the commoner? Or, according to the right's critics, the cynical, radical, reformist Republican Party, run by someone with less experience, who wants the country to resemble some form of the past? Apocalypse Now has been cited as an inaccurate depiction of the Vietnam conflict, yet it still endures as a symbol of the conflict. Similarly, the election isn't necessarily just about granular policy differences between the two sides,
His policies and his ideas for tax cuts for billionaires.
but the symbolism that both parties represent, and which one the people wants to represent them for the next 4 years, until the cycle begins anew. Vietnam defined America as much as a new president will define it. After all the spectacle, the money, and the discourse ends,
Someday this war's gonna end.
it'll all be ready to happen again. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully this thing came across balanced. It's quite difficult to do when you're talking about politics, but it was also quite an experimental one, so let me know what you think. Just put some feedback in the comments below. And yeah, cheers, thank you.